Boker Tov.
Good morning, the Minister of Defense, the IDC President and Founder, and distinguished guests. I am very happy to invite the Minister of Defense, who will share with us his thoughts. The Minister of Defense is, of course, a key character and minister in the State of Israel, and whatever he can share with us is very important. The fact that he has found the time to come and share his thoughts with us this morning is also of utmost importance. Minister of Defense, I must say that on a personal note, as far as I remember, it is now exactly 1 year to your term in office. And in Israel, 1 year is 100 years in Switzerland. When we look at your history, and I remember we used to work together dozens of years ago already, before you even thought you would be in the Ministry of Defense. But the fact that a new immigrant comes to Israel, personally speaking, I think that is very moving. As for your contribution to society, there's no need to introduce you, and your opinions are also well known, but you're always surprising. So I'm certain you will surprise us this morning as well. With us, alongside the distinguished guests, there's also the coordinator in the combat with Daesh, with ISIS, and he will be speaking in about an hour. So, Minister of Defense, the floor is yours. Good morning, one and all. My distinguished teacher, Professor Uriel Reichman, Major General in Reserves Amos Gilead, and the Special Envoy and Coordinator of the combat against Daesh. To tell you the truth, I did not have the time to make a speech, and Amos, you probably know that the Minister of Defense does not have any thoughts. I have no time to think. But on the way over here, I tried to put something together and to try and think of what to talk about. And I decided that this morning we'll talk about puzzles, riddles, enigmas, several important ones in our understanding and for the future. And when I look at all of the current events, the first such puzzle is, why is it that to date we have not been able to reach any agreement with the Palestinians? We have signed the Oslo Accords in 1993. It's been 24 years since then. 24 years. Next year we can celebrate the silver wedding, half jubilee, 25 years the Oslo Accords. And unlike evil people like me, myself, and the Prime Minister, as I've said, there have been some good people over the years, during those years, that really and truly wanted to reach it. I remember all of the efforts made by Prime Minister Ehud Olmert. I remember the efforts made by Ariel Sharon, Ehud Barak, Tzipi Livni. And the big question is, why have we failed? And this riddle or puzzle or enigma has, I think, two answers, which I have talked about in the past. The first reason or cause is that first and foremost, the principle, which is a basic principle in these efforts to reach an agreement, is wrong. Land for peace. 24 years down the line, we can already reach that conclusion. It is wrong because it creates asymmetry, meaning this is a model that's on the table and we want to establish a Palestinian state that is homogenic, 100% Palestinians, and we are turning the state of Israel into a binational state with 22% Palestinians in Israel. Therefore, the guiding principle should be an exchange of territories and populations. And another thing, which is also or perhaps more significant, is the order is wrong. The Palestinians do not have the capacity, do not have the ability to sign on their own, to reach on their own an arrangement or accord with the State of Israel. Numerous times I have gone over the sequence of events in Annapolis, and unfortunately, both in politics and between our statesmen. Unlike the military, we never draw lessons, we never learn, we never carry out any retrospective investigations or studies or examinations. In the IDF, when there is even the smallest malfunction, the smallest incident, then we draw lessons from it, and here we have such a grandiose event. Everything was ready for the ceremony at the White House, and at the last minute, Mahmoud Abbas refused to sign the agreement, and no one drew any lessons from it. Nobody learned anything from it. And on various occasions, I have said that we cannot offer the Palestinians more than Ehud Olmert offered them in Annapolis. I was shocked, absolutely shocked, to see what he offered them in Annapolis. And there will never be another prime minister who will offer any more than that. And he refused to sign at the end of the day. And therefore, I would estimate, without understanding, without drawing lessons, without learning what has happened over the last 24 years, with all the efforts of the international community and several presidents, we cannot move forward. And the main conclusion I have drawn from this, and again I would like to reiterate this, is that the order should be different. First of all, a regional agreement, and only then it should be followed by an agreement with the Palestinians. Anyone who is trying to condition, to take us hostage to resolve the Palestinian issue, brings us to a dead end, a deadlock. And we will not be able to emerge from it. We will never be able, in my estimation, as part of this bilateral framework, we will never be able to resolve the conflict. If we want to resolve the conflict, we must first and foremost reach an agreement with all the Sunni moderate states, and only then can we, because it's a byproduct, it can be then only reached an agreement with the Palestinians. And let us not delude ourselves. Even when we do reach a final status agreement and resolve the conflict with the Palestinians, the issues will not stop. On the contrary, there will be far more problems. The Palestinians do not have the capacity on their own, not in terms of security or economics. We will not allow one single refugee to return to the 1967 borders. That's at least my view. Not a single refugee, not a quarter refugee will return to the borders of 1967. If they want to take them in Nablus or Hebron or Kalkilia, let them. But even then, we must estimate very cautiously that there will be about 700,000 Palestinian refugees that will primarily come back from Syria and Lebanon. Not a single Palestinian will return from Canada or the UK. But all the refugees, all the Palestinian refugees that currently live artificially and cruelly are being held without any documentation or rights in Syria and Lebanon, all of those will want to return. To absorb 700,000 people in terms of housing, in terms of the economy, in terms of people who do not have a profession. There's a generation here growing up in Syria that for the last 6 years have not been to school. This is a big story. So do not delude yourselves. Even when we do resolve the conflict with the Palestinians, it will not solve the issues. In fact, it will actually magnify them. And the only thing that is a light at the end of the tunnel is a regional arrangement, a comprehensive agreement, full diplomatic relations, full economic relations, not under the table but over the table. With the Gulf states, with Saudi Arabia, with Kuwait, we have seen a very interesting study. And what does a regional mean? And what does economic relations, full economic relations mean between Israel and the Gulf state and Saudi Arabia and all of that moderate Sunni axis? It is an income of $45 billion for the state of Israel. It's not small, $45 billion. That is the potential of income from such an arrangement. So we also need to very clearly say what is our priority. If we only see issues here, then I'll see many advantages there. Particularly for those states. Israel can give so much to their capability to counter terrorism, all of the various problems such as intelligence, cyber, preparation and training of special forces, etc. So, first of all, in the political realm, the idea of reaching an agreement with the Palestinians without context, without a regional agreement with the Arab states, I think, to me, nothing will change as has been in the last 24 years. The second thing, which is also very interesting, why is there no regional agreement? That is the second puzzle. The first puzzle, as I've said, was why did we not reach an agreement with the Palestinians? The second riddle is, why are we talking for the last few years, by the way, the idea of a regional agreement in 2014 for the first time here at the Herzliya conference at the IDC of Uriel Reichman. I talked about this in 2014. It was in May or June in 2014 when I was the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And now 3 years later, I keep asking, why have we not reached a regional agreement? Well, that too is very interesting. When I would look for reasons a decade ago, why did we not reach diplomatic relations with all the Arab states? I think that one of the problems we have is that since 1967 we have not won a single campaign. In fact, the real campaign, the last time we won, was the 6-Day War. That no one had a doubt who came out victorious and who was defeated. And in the absence of such victories, there is insecurity on the other side. We talked highly of many things, but at the end of the day, we did not deliver. At the end of the day, many of the issues we talked about, many of the promises we had made, and I remember that when we came out of Lebanon, someone said, if there will be a single shot, then Lebanon will shake. And when we left the Gaza Strip, they said, after we came back, after we returned to the 1967 lines, if there'll be terrorism coming out of there, we will eliminate them, and so on and so forth. And many promises have been made, including some by me, that we did not deliver on. And therefore, here, we must clarify that any conflict we have in the future, we must come out victorious. In the past, we had really glorious operations that are taught in military academies all over the world. But if we go to any ground operation in Lebanon War, the first Lebanon War was the last time we did it. Everything else since then was just tidbits. It wasn't a real grounds operation. Last time we did it was in the first Lebanon War. And the real victory was in the 6-Day War. And therefore, we must, if we, again, people like to connect to who? To someone young, healthy, wealthy, successful. And the states, they do the same. They like to connect and affiliate themselves with strong, successful, victorious countries where everything is stable. And therefore, we must really put an end to that. And the third thing, and again, this matter of no decisive victory, that has impacted our relationship with a moderate Arab state, at least for the last decade. And I hope that in the next few years, in the near future, we will be able to break through that strategically. Another riddle or puzzle is what is happening with the Israeli Arabs. Where are they headed? Again, I meet often with Arabs who are citizens of Israel, and they really are the most loyal, intelligent people, really reasonable guys, as they say in Yiddish. And you speak to them, and you realize that they have internalized the fact that there's no better place for them than the state of Israel. You see what is happening with immigration of Arabs in the Middle East, from all countries, the most successful. Everyone is trying to run away to Germany, to Canada, to Australia, to the UK, to France. The only place that people don't want to leave is Israel. Why? Because they're happy here. There's not a single country in the world where they are so free. They have freedom of expression. And again, with all the criticism that we impose on ourselves and the criticism they have, which is also justified, they still understand that there's no better place for them than the state of Israel. So how is it that at the end of the day they vote Ahmad Tibi or Ayman Uda? And there too, I would suggest that we all not be captive in all sorts of prejudices and biases, but rather go with the facts. And I don't want to go into too much detail, we all know the facts. But when the Arab Joint List refuses to sign an agreement, an access agreement with Meretz, not with Israel Beitenu, but with Meretz because they are a Zionist party, that requires looking into. When Ayman Uda refuses to come to the funeral of the president of the state of Israel, Shimon Peres, and says he is a murderer from Kfar Kana, and then the next day he goes to Arafat's Memorial Day, then that requires looking into. When Ahmad Tibi goes to George Habish's funeral in Amman and explains that he is a righteous person that should receive the Nobel Peace Prize, and that's an Israeli member of Knesset, that requires looking into. And when the entire Joint List condemns the Arab League, not the Israeli League, but the Arab League, for putting Hezbollah into the list of terror organizations, that requires looking into. And we keep asking people, and everyone has a friend or a neighbor or a colleague, and we don't understand where these gaps come from between what we see in elections and what we feel on the streets in our daily lives. I think that the answer or solution to this third riddle is the state of Israel. It's us. We're to blame. When I look at the history of our relations with the Arab minority, I say I cannot even blame them. Anyone who had remained here lost. And I begin with the Nashashibi family before the state was established. And I continue on with King Abdallah, the great-grandfather of the current King Abdallah, King of Jordan. And I go to Issam Sartawi, and Anwar Sadat, and Bashir Jumail, and the Southern Lebanon Army, and so on and so forth. And Mustafa Duddin, and Amos can probably double the list that I have just given, at least. And when I look at this outcome, I can understand them. It is my feeling that they're not doing enough either. And I speak with many intellectuals, Arab intellectuals that are citizens of Israel and are businessmen. And if anyone were to pluck up the courage and say, stop with all this nonsense. We, the Israeli Arabs, are Israeli citizens. Even if a state of Palestine were to be established, we will stay here. We will fight for our place here in Israeli society. Then such a list, such a party, will get 65 or 70% of the Arab votes. Because they need, for the first time ever, to just pluck up the courage and say these things explicitly. We're happy here in Israel, there are problems, there's room for improvement, and we'll do it together, but we have to stop this engagement with Hezbollah and with Qatar and with Azmi Bshara, with all those all these people who are smuggling telephones for murderers who have murdered Israeli soldiers. We would rather prefer our own community and not all of these Palestinian issues, and stop with the hypocrisy. By the way, in the civil war in Syria, to date, some 6,000 Palestinians have been slaughtered, and not a single word have I heard, not from Abu Mazen, not from Ayman Uda. They simply don't engage in it. And in Gaza, the Palestinians are executed. There's no law, there's no court, there's nothing, no procedure, and I've not heard a single word against that. And therefore, I think that here too, we should draw lessons from that. We should understand that we're in the Middle East, and and your liability, your credibility to stand behind your allies is a supreme value. And they also need to learn lessons from this, because at the end of the day, deep inside, they know exactly what's happening. And therefore, all of these arguments I'm making are against them too. And the fourth riddle, I've recently been asked often, what's going to happen in Gaza? Are we on the brink of war there again? What's going to happen with Hezbollah? What's going to happen in Syria? And again, I repeat for the umpteenth time the same statement. We have no intention to initiate any military campaign, not in the summer and not this autumn, not in the north and not in the south. It is our intention to prevent war, and one can only prevent war if one creates true, reliable, credible deterrence that is on the table and no one doubts it. And that is our main goal. As for what's happening in the Gaza Strip, look, since I came into the Ministry of Defense, I have a strategy, I have my tactics and my strategy, I know what I want, because the question is always, what's the end game? At the end of the day, what do we want happening in the Gaza Strip? Because the situation cannot last forever. Unfortunately, and again, my strategy in the Gaza Strip cannot be discussed even by the cabinet, because if I were to explain that in the cabinet, then a minute later I'll see it on the media and on the web and everywhere else. But here too, I'm not going to go into detail. You must be certain, you must rest assured that at least in terms of the Ministry of Defense today, we are heading this, we are leading this process, not because we are just doing some patchwork and we're not tailing behind them. We have a clear path ahead of us. As for the crisis, this crisis is internal. It's internal in the Palestinian society. I don't think we need to go into it by force. I don't think that this is going to be resolved. Abu Mazen did not cut back right now. It's not a one-time thing. They're going to continue cutting down, and in a few months they're going to stop paying both for petrol and for medicine and for salaries and for many other things. So it's not just a tactical step made by Abu Mazen, which is cutting back the financing of the energy that is going to the Gaza Strip. No, for him it's a strategy which is dual, both to harm Hamas, but also to drag Hamas to go to war with Israel. Otherwise, I can't understand why he would do something unilaterally without coordinating it with us or with Egypt or with Jordan. It's just a unilateral step that he is continuing to spearhead on his own unilaterally, and therefore I can only understand or conclude that he is trying to make Hamas surrender, but really he's hoping that we will be dragged into conflict with Hamas in the Gaza Strip. That he will fail, by the way. The second point has to do with everything that's happening in the north. Look, I have the greatest respect for our allies in the United States. We have a very open, intense, sincere dialogue with Russia on these issues, but at the end of the day, the responsibility and the decisions are here. They're ours in Jerusalem. That's where the decisions will be made. And I want to reiterate that we have no intention to initiate any military campaign, but at the same time, we are taking action as long as there are three conditions. The first, when there is harm to Israeli sovereignty, when someone fires. I see that it's starting to blink, so I'll try to wrap up quickly. when there is fire aimed at sovereign Israeli territory, when there is a terrorist, a ticking bomb on the way, and we identify someone who's trying to carry out a terrorist attack, then we take action to thwart it. Or if there is significant smuggling of weapons, of advanced systems to one of the terror organizations. And unfortunately, what is happening now in Syria, Hezbollah has made use of the situation in Syria in order to, first of all, develop another front in southern Syria against the state of Israel, against Israeli Golan Heights. Hezbollah is making use of the situation in order to smuggle advanced weapons from Syria to Hezbollah in Lebanon. And Hezbollah is also making use of the situation in Syria in order to increase its presence in southern Lebanon on the border with Israel. And here again, I would like to say very clearly and to warn the Syrian regime that it is encouraging them, it is encouraging Hezbollah as well as Iran to turn Syria into a base against Israel. The Syrian regime will pay the price, will take responsibility. They can no longer continue smuggling weapons to Hezbollah into Lebanon, into Beirut. The Dabanal, the international airport in Damascus, cannot be the primary location for smuggling, and certainly they cannot provide Hezbollah with weapons and advanced weaponry systems. We are a responsible state with a responsible leadership, and we are doing everything in our power to create deterrence. But when it comes to a certain line and action is required, then we will not hesitate. And certainly there are negotiations intensively taking place between the United States and Russia and Syria with buffer zones, etc. And I hope that they will reach a good understanding and arrangement, but that will not stop us from having freedom of action and anything we will feel that we need to do in order to ensure Israeli interests, security interests, we will do regardless of anything else. Thank you very much and have a good morning.